Yeah, so she went there and then she,
Should have married a rich guy from Newport. That's a trick.
she won't get married. I really wish I could have a wedding in that damn, open court.
What's up, Jack?
Hey, what you doing, old man?
I'm good, man. How you doing, Serena?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
I'm blessed.
You too.
Blessed, blessed.
We're blessed by your friends.
You guys join us tonight? I want to hang out in the gallery. All right, okay. You know, give me some popcorn and watch this thing whenever.
All right.
I really should go to election members of the board.
What? Really? Then I did.
Really? And I had.
Oh, I didn't really know about this thing. I think it's my doppelganger.
No.
Have you? I knew I was alive.
That's two elected members. You got 7 votes. You can't beat a guy 7 to 3.
Right. You good?
Doors won't open, doors won't open.
He's all right? You're gonna be all right. I got Bill.
And it's just too much.
I got Bill. You be all right? Okay.
We would make a point just to see.
Yep.
How are you, sir?
Is it me or it's in the bar?
Not since COVID. I don't know. Oh my God, I didn't do much.
You know, football.
I haven't seen,
Yeah, sure.
I don't remember all. I mean, I saw you, but I don't remember where. It was some political thing. I don't know. So don't say anything bad about Steve Mednick. You might be able to hear him.
Okay, all right.
Just in case you do.
Oh, that's the guys on the camera. Yep. No.
Right here. Richard got it. What is that? The Seinfeld episode. What episode is that? No soup for you.
No soup for you.
Thank you. You want more?
Mhm.
Talking about it.
Okay, we're gonna call the meeting to order. Gonna read the notice. It is New Haven, 2023, New Haven Charter Revision Commission will convene on the following dates and times. The Board of Alder's chamber located on the 2nd floor of City Hall, 165 First Street, New Haven, Connecticut. The work of the commission is as follows: March 9th, 6 p.m. DOA, gender neutrality revision. Item number 2, correcting language, number of terms for the Board of Education members. 3, which is item 8, removing provisions that have timed out in previous charters, including but not limited to bills related to approving ordinances concerning purchases, department heads, and qualifications. 9, review and extending the time period for approval for nominations of board of commissions from 60 to 90 days. Meeting dates, March 23rd, workshop on charter, April 11th, 6 p.m., workshop on charter, April 12th, workshop on charter, April 22nd, workshop on charter if needed. The 25th will be deliberations, recommended commission, and then the final date for deliberations and public hearings will be on May 9th. For order, Michael Smart, Chair, Honorable Richard Pearl, Vice Chair, Honorable Ann Ford, Secretary, Test Michael Smart, City Town Clerk, accessibility related to accommodations, please call 946-7571 Voice or 203-946-8582 TTY TDD. Public comment, testimony, and request to testify should be submitted via email to publictestimony@newhavencT.gov, 2 p.m. on the date of the meeting. These meetings may be viewed on the Board of Alder's YouTube page per ongoing COVID-19 protocol, wearing a mask is required at the meeting. Start over to my left, introducing Commissioner.
Jack Pease.
Serena Yosandrojo.
Richard Furlow.
Mike Smart.
Sal DeCola.
Sandra Trevino.
Ann Schwartz.
Patricia Melton.
Okay, so we welcome the public. I want to acknowledge Alder Wingate. I want to acknowledge Alder Rodriguez joined us, and then Alder Miller in the back. Welcome, and welcome to the public. And then we have our council there. Steve, how are you?
Hello, everybody.
Okay, so.
Can I just report a technical issue? The picture of the meeting is very hazy at my end. I don't know if Al can do anything about it. The picture that's showing up of the chambers.
Yeah, I got no blur. We did that on purpose.
I'm wearing my glasses so I can see. There you go. Look at that. Everybody looks so nice now. Pretty. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So we're going to hear from council on the items that we've just read in the notice. So Steve, we're going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the commission, I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks at the next meeting. I'm still away. So let me go through. I sent out 3 documents. I assume that Al has handed them out to everybody. Am I correct, Mr. Chairman?
No. Staff says no.
No.
Ask him which document.
Which documents, he says? Are you frozen, Steve? He asked which documents were they?
He's frozen.
Did you hand out the markups of the sections?
They have the red line.
The red lines?
They have the red line charter, yes.
Yes.
Oh, they don't have the red lines of what I did.
Mm-mm.
Not the sections, no.
Not the sections.
I can print those now.
He's gonna print them down.
Well, you want me to put them up on the I can put them up on the screen.
Yep, let's do
That would be helpful. Thank you.
All right. I'm disabled. I need to be enabled to share screen. Share the screen.
Was that easy in real life?
Great.
All right, you should be good now?
Make sure everyone has that.
Yeah, I'm gonna say. Go ahead, Steven.
All right.
Share screen.
Screen. Gotcha. Here we go. Now we're there. All right. Let's see.
Now, there we go.
All right. What do you see on the screen? Do you see the mayor?
Yes.
Correct.
Good. Excellent. Is that large enough for people to see? You want me to make it bigger?
We need it bigger.
All right. I'll do that. I'll do it. Hold on.
Yeah, I can't do anything here. Yeah, I can't do anything. He's got to do it on his end.
I got it. I can do it. All right. That better?
All right.
Yes.
Better.
Okay, good. So this is the chapter. What I'm going to do is walk through. There are not a lot of changes, but I want to walk through each of the changes. And I'm not going to, I'm going to mix and match because every document will address slightly different issues. In this first section, which is Article 3 and the sections that follow, I think 3 and 4 are in here. The first changes you will see are relating to gender neutrality, and I'll just move to the page where that exists. Hold on, here it is. We caught most of them last time. This was not as much of a problem as I saw. Whoops, there we go. So in the current charter, the word chairman shows up. I changed it to chair in this particular place in section 4 of Article 3. The next change in this section is relating to Board of Aldermen, item number 9. It's on the next page. It's in Article 4. And this is the section where it has members of boards and commissions. If a nomination to a position or to a board or commission has not been affirmed or rejected by a vote of the board within currently 60, we're changing it to 90. That is Board of Aldermen request number 9. And those are the only 2 changes in that section of the charter. I don't know how you want to, and that's a standalone, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if you want to approve it or you want to just approve everything at the end of the evening.
I think at the end of the evening. Yeah.
Okay, so let me go to the next document if I can, which is Article 6. All right, I've got to make this larger. Okay, so this is Article 6. We'll have a little bit more in here, not much more. But the first change is one second, I'm just trying to locate it. Is somewhat deep into the document. Okay, so in the section dealing with the duties of the, well, here's one change here. There's a reference in section 2, which deals with the authority of department heads. There's a minor correction. You'll see right here, there's a reference to a section in Article 15. One of the things we're going to be doing tonight is approving the repeal of Article 15 because the Board of Alders will be acting on all the items in that section while the commission is in the field. So that reference will come out. The next change is in section 6, which deals with the personnel director. I'll just try to get down there. Here we are, purchasing. Okay, we're putting in a new provision, Article F and G. We noticed as I was going through Article 15, we wanted to make sure there are certain exemptions that had been in the charter for a while and they should remain in the charter. One is that the Board of Alders should be exempt, their contract should be exempt. The following contract should be exempt from the competitive contract process, and it's contracts for architects, engineers, land surveyors, physicians, dentists, lawyers, accountants, or artists, etc., and any other contracts that are made in accordance with the powers of the Board of Aldermen to go to contract, basically. So the Board of Aldermen has an independent contract authority, and this section basically retains them as well. We also maintain in the charter exemptions that have been in the charter and remain in the charter right now, sole source contracts that are made through cooperative purchasing arrangements, contracts that are approved in accordance with the procedures that are approved by the Board of Alders involving an emergency or threat to the public health, safety, and welfare of the city, and contracts that are made in a manner approved by the Board of Aldermen by the, upon approval of the purchasing agent, where they've advised the alders that it would not be practicable or in the best interest of the city to proceed in the manner suggested, which is a competitive negotiation. So the general rule is you need to have competitive contracts, but there would be a case if the city purchasing agent makes such a recommendation that it's impracticable or in the best interest of the city. Those contracts would be subject to approval without going through the competitive process. Are there any questions on that? Those are provisions that are in here. I noticed as I was moving the section out that they were in the section that we were deleting. I don't think they should be deleted and left up to ordinance. I think these are the kinds of things you want to have as kind of a constitutional standard for the community.
Steve, we got a question from Commissioner Scanjurna.
I actually just wanted you to repeat that last statement that you made regarding that change.
Yeah, the reason that we're leaving this, it looks like a change. It is in the current charter. It was in the section of the charter that we were going to delete. As I was going through that section, I was preparing a proposed ordinance for the Board of Alders. I noticed that these sections were in here, in that section, and I don't think they should. I think those sections should remain in the charter. They do provide for exceptions to the competitive procurement process. The first series of them deal with matters that are exclusively for the Board of Alders. The others are some general principles involved in procurement, such as sole source procurements, cooperative purchasing arrangements. For example, if you buy off the state list, for example, you would not have to go through a competitive procurement process because they had to compete to get on the state list. So it doesn't make sense if there are items available or even services available on the state list that you would have to go through that process. If you were going through an emergency, a public emergency, and there's statutory foundations for public emergencies, you should be able to proceed with contracts without having to go through competition. But keep in mind, the procedures need to be approved by the Board of Alders so that they can either do it through an ordinance or through a policy that would come from the purchasing department that is approved, specifically approved by the Board of Alders, that deals with contracting in the case of an emergency. And the final category is kind of a catch-all, but it puts the burden on the city purchasing agent to advise and opine, so that we might want to put in writing, there should be some written justification to have the purchasing agent indicate that it is just not practicable for whatever reasons for the purchasing department to have to go through a competitive negotiation, and that it is in the best interest of the city to proceed without going through competitive procurement. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So the next, I'm sorry.
Yeah, let me just ask, this is removing the bidding process? Is that when you say?
No. It removes the bidding process in these limited ways. The charter does have as a standard competitive bidding and competitive negotiations for procurements. These are 5 exceptions or 6 exceptions to that rule. They're very narrow and they're pretty standard in the industry.
I understand.
And they're in the current charter.
Yep, I get it. Thank you.
All right.
Chair, could we get this printed?
Yeah, please.
Okay, it's great.
All right. So the next change is a minor question. It's on the gender neutrality issue. I just wanted to bring it to everybody's attention. I did not make a change, but before, and here it is. The word human, is everybody okay? It's used once in the charter. That is not a word that would need to be modified in accordance with the request for gender neutrality. Or does somebody have an alternative word that they would recommend if they think it makes sense? it's a pretty standard terminology. This is the concept of human habitation. It's a power of the director to the director of public health to regulate foodstuffs, to order vacating of land or buildings unfit for human habitation. As I was going through it, the word man showed up, and I just didn't know whether, I don't know if the alders who are there have any thoughts on this, since they wanted to move toward neutrality, whether there's a better way to express this. I did not make the change because I wasn't sure it was necessary. Anyone?
More time.
Yeah, we should probably just have a brief discussion on that one, Attorney. I don't think we have an issue with it, but I'm not very versed with the neutrality, the he, she, they, and I think there's a them and possibly it. So we just want to make sure that we're coming into some kind of conformity with all the gender neutral pronouns.
Yeah, what we've done with gender neutrality is we've basically tried to remove all the pronouns so that we don't run into those issues going forward, that the charter is clear in terms of what it means. It was just this one word that was posing an issue. I'll continue to take a look and see if there's any glossaries that give us any further guidance on the use of the word human in that context.
Makes sense.
Is that all right?
That works. Thank you.
All right. The next change is a fairly significant change. It doesn't change anything substantively, but it does address an issue that the board was concerned about. We ran into an issue in the last go around with the appointments to the Board of Education. And so what we've done here is I've made it very clear what the composition of the Board of Education is. The Board of Education consists of 7 members. You see the language?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody sees it? Okay. The mayor, 4 members appointed by the mayor, subject to approval by the board, 2 elected by district. And that's very clearly the 7-member structure of the Board of Ed. I'm not eliminating student representation. I moved it. So don't get upset. It's the students still have representatives, but I moved it. And so what I did also in subpart 3 is, for whatever reasons historically, we have 3 different appointment cycles. There's 1 member who will next be up for a term that's commencing on January 1 of 2025. There are 2 for a term commencing on January 1 of 2026. And then there's 1 member for a term commencing on January 1, 2027. Al and I talked about this, and we decided to leave well enough alone. I was going to create a stagger so that you'd have an appointment every year. And if the commission would like us to do that, I'm happy to do that. But the language that we have here basically honors, kind of reverse engineers and honors the current appointment procedures that we have. We did not go back and look and find out when this protocol was established, so you had 2 in 1 cycle. But right now, that's the cycle. And with the years laid out, it makes it very clear when those appointments are up based on the current membership. And so that there should be no dispute or no question about the composition of the Board of Education going in the future. The subsection that's deleted was the transitional subsection from the charter revision 10 years ago, so that should come out. We have the elected members, and the composition of the districts are subject to the provisions of the charter dealing with redistricting. I thought that should be made clear. Again, the transition provision comes out there because we now have the 2 elected members and there is no need for a transition. They are in office and we know what their cycles are. Then I simply, that's not new language. That is the language that was deleted. I simply moved the student representation to the end of the appointment cycles because it's just a clearer way of addressing the issue. Is that all right? I mean, so again, the choice was keep it with the current protocol or create a transitional term to allow for appointments every year. I don't think it's a big issue, but if the commission felt that they wanted to have a new appointment to the Board of Ed every year, we would have to work out a transition provision for that. So the language that's drafted does not have a transition. It simply honors the current appointment cycles. All right.
Yes.
The next changes are all gender neutrality changes. Again, we did not change the word chairman to chair. We are doing that now in the section dealing with the Board of Ethics. There's also a change a little further down. These are not earth-shattering issues, but these are cleanup issues. But I wanted to show them all to you. Whoops, here it is. And then the next one is in the section dealing with the Civil Service Board. Again, the word chairman is now going to be chair. And the final changes are at the very end in the Board of Zoning Appeals. The chairman becomes chair in 3 different places. And those are the changes in that section, those sections of the charter. Let me go to the last section that we're going to go over tonight, if I can find it here. I'm working with 3 screens here, so sorry. Here. And this one will go pretty quickly because it's basically a deletion. Oh, here we go. Got it. It's up here. So this is basically, I'll show you. There are no real changes in the beginning of this section. We're eliminating the entirety of, this is a very long section, unfortunately. Here it is. We're eliminating Article 15. These are the historic purchasing and department head qualification provisions. At the charter revision 10 years ago, it was decided that rather than have the rules established by charter, like what the minimum contract amount is for procurement, competitive procurement, that would be done by ordinance. These are the exemptions that were going to come out that I recommend that we leave in here. F is the form of contract, things like contract security, procedures for opening bids. It makes no sense to have those procedures laid out in the charter. The charter section in the body of the charter requires the purchasing director to do all of these things, to have a competitive process, to establish a form of contract, to establish security, how you open, to establish a procedure for opening bids, and all the other issues that are addressed in that section. The same is true of the wage provisions required in public works contracts. There are state laws and federal laws that govern that. And rather than have it in the charter, we are going to be recommending that the Board of Aldermen establish and adopt these, at least as a placeholder, the current provisions so that we can get rid of this section. This section should have been dealt with in the last 10 years. It was not. And rather than hold it over for another 10 years, I've recommended that we simply adopt the current standard and make the changes hopefully over the course of the next few months. But we have to approve this in order to get this out of the charter. It's just taking up a lot of pages, and it doesn't. And if the intent is to have these things approved by ordinance, we should simply do that. That's also true in section 2 with department head qualifications. And so that all of these department heads that are currently have qualifications laid out in the charter, these department head qualifications will be established by ordinance. It requires the purchasing director to provide a report and a recommendation to the Board of Alders on what the best standard is. For example, corporation counsel, deputy and assistant corp counsels, city controller, the purchasing agent, the assessor, the director of public works, all of the big positions, engineer, the chiefs, police and fire, parks and rec, building officials or inspectors, public health, which is really governed by state law, the librarian, superintendent of schools, which frankly is really directed to some extent by state law, Title 10 of the state statutes, and the personnel director, planning director, and director of traffic and parking. So all of those current requirements will, I will be recommending that the Board of Alders simply keep them in place by ordinance until the purchasing director makes a recommendation on what the new standards should be. But in the meantime, the hope is that this will be done by May or June, and that we will be able to take this out of the charter. And those are the changes.
I have a question. Oh, sorry. So right now it is in the charter. What's going to be the difference with it taken out? If it's already a sort of a structure that's followed, is this redundant and that's why it's being taken out?
It's not redundant. It was just felt by the last charter commission that the job qualification standards could change from time to time. And it doesn't make sense to have to convene a charter revision process to make these changes. It's better to have them in the Code of Ordinances. Some of the critical requirements, like residency for some of these positions, those remain in the charter. But as to the professional qualifications, it was felt 10 years ago, and the chair was the chair 10 years ago, so he might have some thoughts on this. And Mr. Lucas, Al, also was around 10 years ago. I believe that the thought was it was better to address these issues in real time so that you could make the changes that need to be made on a professional level. And it requires best practice standards. The ordinance will have a best practice standard. The charter has a best practice standard, so that when these things leave the charter, the Board of Alders can't go out with the personnel director and simply create a position that's a sinecure, a position that is created for some political buddy who has no qualifications, and lower the standards so that person can be there, because there is a best practice standard in accordance with the standards of the industry or profession or service that is provided by that person. So that standard is in the charter. That governs the actions of the Board of Alders and the personnel director, and in the acceptance of the concept that in good faith, the Alders and the personnel director will adopt the highest standards. I think the commission 10 years ago felt that the best way to deal with these in real time was to have the Board of Alders have the ability through ordinance to make these changes.
A note for the record, Alder Herrera has joined us. Welcome.
One more question. Thank you. So does that mean like the charter 10 years before that, I guess, does anyone know what the history is? Like, has it always been in the charter? And no,
These provisions have been in the charter for a long time. I can speak from personal experience. When I was a little boy lawyer, when I was a young lawyer, back in the late 1970s, I was a brand new lawyer. I was hired to be an assistant corporation counsel, and I did not have the 2-year requirement, so I could not be assistant corporation counsel. They had to create a special position for me. I was the lobbyist for the city, basically, when I was a young lawyer. And I could not serve as an assistant corporation counsel because the charter had a 2-year requirement. I was not out of law school for 2 years at that point. And I could not serve. And so the idea is, and I know that the corporation counsel, when she was testifying, she wanted to see a change in the standard for the entry level at the corporation counsel's office. And as it currently is set forth in the charter, in these provisions that remain in the charter, it would prohibit her from hiring somebody who she thinks has had an experience. I think in her case, she has somebody who's been working in the office for 2 years, is not a lawyer for 2 years, but was a law student during that period of time, but knows a great deal about the office. And she might want to make a hiring decision, but really can't do it under the current charter provision. So the idea is to provide some level of flexibility, but again, to do it in accordance with the best practices in the field. And so, law firms, as a matter of course, hire people out of law school. The Corp Counsel's office is not capable of doing that in New Haven. And so we're not making this change. This change actually was recommended 10 years ago. So it's not directly responsive to the Corporation Counsel's request, but it is consistent with her request. And so the thought was that your personnel director and the Board of Alders should put together the current job descriptions for these important positions, and not have it locked in, written in stone in the charter, where you'd have to go to a charter revision, or you circumvent the charter, which I do not recommend we do.
Okay, thank you, but I still might have some more questions, but I'm just think on.
I'm here. I can answer as many as you have. If it's okay with the chair, I'm happy to answer. That was not me. Are there any other questions?
I wonder if that was a sign.
Yes, I have a question. So these positions, by charter, they'll remain in the charter. The positions remain without the qualifications. Are there any positions that you recommend should not be part of the charter?
No, I thought that the position that they took were quite sound. As you go through these positions, let's just go through them. In the Corp Counsel, you might want to maintain some kind of standard for. And here, the irony is, one of my other cities is just putting into their charter the 10-year requirement for the Corporation Counsel, and thinking that you need to have somebody who has some level of experience. Now, another one of my communities eliminated the 10-year requirement because they said, what if we have this outstanding person who clerked for a Supreme Court justice and worked in the Justice Department, but it's only been practicing for 7 or 8 years? Why would we want to lose out on an opportunity to bring somebody extraordinary like that in? So, I mean, that's one that would be debatable from my perspective. I do think that as a former corporation counsel, you want to have somebody who has some level of experience. In 10 years, in my view, would be a reasonable time. So if I had to look at that one, I would say that might not be one that might be something you'd consider. Maybe create a waiver if you end up with that Supreme Court clerk, and have a waiver provision. So that's one that I might play with. This second one is the 2-year requirement for assistants and deputies. I think that the Corp Counsel made a good point. I think the point was accepted 10 years ago before she was Corporation Counsel, that you should establish a standard that is a standard that would work. I think that, in my view, there should be a little more flexibility there. You don't want to have an office of deputies and assistants of 1 year in duration or 2 years in duration. You want to make sure you have experienced people in those offices. And I would hope that the Board of Alders and the Personnel Director, working with the Corp Council, would come up with some standard that would make sense. But I don't have an issue there. The controller standard, again, we're establishing a requirement that the controller have, that the description for the controller's job be one that is based on nationally accepted standards, which was a standard in this provision, but it's now a general standard in the charter. So that standard is in the charter. Even if you eliminate this provision, they have to adopt standards for qualifications for a controller that are consistent with nationally accepted standards, and have a background in accounting and finance and other similar fields, which probably would be a standard requirement for somebody who's a finance director or a controller or a budget director, those kinds of things. And the same is true. I mean, a city assessor is a fairly important provision. There's a statute, if you see in this section, that we're eliminating the section, but the statute is not being eliminated. The assessor has to be a certified municipal assessor under state law. So to have that in the charter doesn't make it any more poignant or enforceable than not having it in the charter. And again, I think the feeling was that between the purchasing director and the Board of Alders, you should be able to come up with a job description that is suitable for the times that we're living in. Public Works Director, again, should be in the same way. The Public Works Director requirements are not really spelled out in this section. Hopefully they would be more spelled out in an ordinance than they are in the current charter. City engineer, again, there's a 5-year requirement currently in the charter that will go away. It'll be up to the Board of Alders and the Personnel Director to decide what the standard should be. The Chief of Police standard was very exact. I mean, take a look at this description. I think everybody felt it was overly prescriptive. I'm not sure the 5 years was overly prescriptive, but the number of people in a police department and the number of people served, I think people felt really restricted the range of people that you might consider for a police chief. It's a very specific requirement. It must have been placed in there for some reason at some time, but not in the last 30 or 40 years. It goes back quite a bit. I don't think that section has been touched. I think this was the provision when I was on the Board of Alders in the 80s and early 90s. And I again think that the last commission felt that we should be dealing with a more current standard. And as I've said, to expedite this process, I'm going to be requesting that the board simply enact the current provisions so that we have something on the books. And then they will have to, over the course of the next year or so, try to update all of these positions. Same is true of fire chief. Again, they had similar requirements, the 5-year standard, the 200 employees, and the 100,000 resident standard. Those will be reconsidered by the Board of Alders. They may not go away. They may keep the standard. It may be a best practice. But I think the feeling 10 years ago was, let's do it in real time. And I guess the question you really need to ask yourself is, if you believe that that is a foundational and structural requirement that you couldn't imagine having a fire chief who did not have that experience, you may want to leave it in the charter. I'm not making the argument to do that, but that's the question you have to ask yourself, as to whether or not that is an essential qualification for somebody to be a fire chief. Again, Director of Parks and Rec, it's a very loose standard. It's experience in the management and administration of city parks and recreation. I can't imagine that the standard that would be adopted would be any less than that. That's a fairly vague standard. public works, public officials, building officials and inspectors. There's a kind of an or quality that covers a lot of areas. Again, there's the 5-year practical experience standard. I don't know if that is a really important foundation or not. It might be, but it covers a lot of territory. And again, I can't imagine that there will be a looser standard adopted by the Board of Alders and the Personnel Director after they do their due diligence. The Director of Health is governed to a great extent by state law. Librarians fairly vague, and the standards for librarians, I think, can be created pretty easily. As I said, Superintendent of Schools is really governed by state statute. Be curious to see what the Personnel Director recommends for his or her position. But again, it's a fairly vague standard already. And, planning and traffic and parking are fairly vague, and I think you can probably do a better job in developing those positions. So those are the 17 positions. You can decide, you still have the ability to decide whether or not you think any of them should remain, any of the standards should remain in the charter. 10 years ago, the commission believed that those standards should be moved to the Code of Ordinances.
Attorney, I'm just wondering, it seems not just the standards, but it seems like some of these positions may be better served by ordinance rather than in the charter. But I guess that's just something for the commission to kind of look at. But I was just wondering that because these positions are already approved. So how would we,
this would be going, you can't change the standard for the people in the current position. This would be going forward when you replace your police chief or fire chief or your public works director, the new standard would apply, whatever the standard is that's in effect.
So then would there be language, will we have to create language in the charter that would state that somehow moving forward, the job qualifications would have to be done by ordinance?
That is in the charter. The language is in the body of the charter that sets up the process for establishing the ordinance provisions. And you really can't, as a matter of law, change somebody's job description. It would be a problem. Would be a problem.
Okay. We still don't have it in front of us, so my apologies for not seeing that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought this was sent out the other day. I apologize.
And so,
I would recommend that you not take an action on tonight. Why don't we make sure you have these documents in front of you and hold off action until you have a chance to actually review them.
Yep. I spoke to the vice chair about that already.
Yeah.
So my last question, Mr. Chair, is, so the recommendation would be to just list the positions without qualifications. So just say the city shall have a planning director, director of traffic and parking.
Well, not really. That's my recommendation over the years to many of my municipalities is to go in that direction. But if you go through chapter 6, which is the departments and department heads, it allows for the creation of departments. It allows for reorganization plans. And I'll be more than happy, maybe in our next meeting, Mr. Chair, to go through that section. This was not part of the mandate, but one of the things I normally recommend, and I think I probably said it in my overall opening statement to the commission several weeks ago, is I would like to see a charter that just doesn't name many boards or commissions or departments, that simply says you need to have departments to address these issues. In New Haven, we have chosen historically to maintain a more robust delineation of responsibilities. So as you will see, if you look at your charter or look at the red line that Al handed out, if you go to Article 6 in your red line, you'll find that there's a very, very detailed, responsibility for, or a series of responsibilities for the departments. The Corp Counsel is laid out very specifically that there's deputies and assistants. Those provisions would be, subject to the ordinances and the qualifications that are set up by ordinance. In fact, in the beginning of the chapter in section 2, C, that's where we established the qualification standard 10 years ago. That gives the Board of Alders the ability to create the qualifications in accordance with nationally accepted professional standards and best practices. You remember, a lot of our department heads have 4-year terms. So I think that anytime you have a vacancy, the personnel director should be looking at the job description of the vacant department position. We also have the ability under the charter to have a reorganization, and you can eliminate provisions that are even in the charter. It's not my preferred approach, but if you want to do a reorganization, the idea of the reorganization provision was to encourage people to look at their government as something that can be changed from time to time if there's a more efficient or effective way of delivering services. You shouldn't be stuck with the structure that you have in the charter. The caveat is that you need to provide all the services that are delineated in the charter. You can reorganize, so you can merge 2 departments if you wanted. I'm not recommending that you do this, but some of my cities are looking at possible merger of police and fire into a protective services department. And so that would be permitted from a leadership perspective. You may have collective bargaining issues you have to address, but that would be permitted under this charter. You're going to have to deal with a lot of issues to get there, as long as you provide the services that are required of a police chief and a fire chief in the city of New Haven and under the charter of the city of New Haven. But I would recommend that you go through these departments. Some of them are very, very detailed. The controller has 5 or 6 pages of detailed responsibilities set forth in the charter. The purchasing director, just to allay any concerns about eliminating all these purchasing provisions, the responsibility of the director is very, very laid out in granularly in this document. The procurement ordinance provision, again, we're asking to remove some of these procurement provisions, is laid out very, very specifically in the charter as well. So I would say that you should look at, as homework, you should take a look at Article 6, and maybe at the next meeting, you'll have a chance to look at these things at home, do your homework, review what we've recommended based on the request of the Board of Alders. And if you want to do some more serious review of the current structure and how detailed it is in the current charter, I can certainly work with you on that. That was not part of the charge, and that's why I did not make that recommendation, because that was not part of the charge from the Board of Alders.
Thank you.
I don't know if I'm hearing this correctly, but it seems that, or maybe that's what I'm hearing, but it's not what is meant. Are you using best practice and standard interchangeably, because they're not necessarily synonyms? So I want to get a sense of how you're using best practice, which is in the charter, as well as standard. Those aren't exactly the same thing.
Well, the best practice standard that we refer to in the charter is whatever the best practice is in the field. We're not establishing what the best practice is for a law department or a public works department. We're simply saying that when you go to make your description, create the job descriptions, that part of the due diligence for the personnel director and for the Board of Alders when they review and consider the item is to make sure that there is tangible support in the field for the job description that you're developing. That would be true if we were doing it in the charter. If we were to try to update all of these descriptions in the charter, it would be, to me, a very substantial, due diligence procedure for us to follow, to take a look at each of these areas to do it. And so it's a broad term. I don't know if it's so broad that you can drive a Mack truck through it and ignore it. It's written fairly clearly and repeated multiple times in this section of the charter in Article 6 on the city, the departments and department heads. If you have a better notion of how we can tighten that standard, I'm more than happy to listen to that as well.
Right, I just bring it up because in listening, I mean, I don't have a document in front of me. So just in listening to the description, it's best practice, and in standard, it's not necessarily best practice standard. So I'm just wondering, how are we using it? And I think your suggestion to go back and really delve in to sort of understand it more now that you've given us this information will be helpful.
Yeah, and I'll make sure, Al and I will tomorrow talk, and we'll make sure that this language gets out to everybody. But I also recommend that you take a look when Article 6 is in this language. So I think the entirety of Article 6 is in the sections we'll send you. So you don't need to look anywhere else. You'll get Article 6 with the packages that we'll send out to you.
Great, thank you.
And we'll plan to review those at the next meeting, Steve.
Good.
Chairman Moore?
Mr. Mendick, if I got this right, what you're saying is that you redline to move it from the charter and put it in an ordinance, code of ordinance, meaning that then we would then follow up by defining what the jobs are or criteria or standards, and then we would then have a vote on the full board of these new things, correct?
That is correct.
Right, so basically by removing this now, meaning that we'll have another committee to redefine what they'll be in the code of ordinance, correct?
Correct. I think there's an interim step there, because what we don't want to do, and what the commission 10 years ago was very careful about, we created this chapter 15 of the charter as a placeholder, as a sunset chapter. And the idea was that within a few months after the charter was approved, it was incumbent upon the board to address these issues. And we recognize the Board of Alders has a lot of business, and sometimes these things don't get done. And my recommendation right now, so that we can take these out of the charter, if you decide, is to simply have the Board of Alders approve the current standards. You might make a couple of changes. You might have people lobby you for some changes right now, but in order to facilitate the process of moving these provisions out of the charter, is to simply adopt the standards that exist right now, so that you're not going without standards. You don't want to have a situation where you don't have a description for your police chief or fire chief. So my interim recommendation is simply to, as a placeholder ordinance, to, as a placeholder, hold the current standards that we're going to be moving out of the charter and make them your legal standard by ordinance. My strong recommendation would be probably after the election at this stage, to have the next session of the Board of Alders, or even the lame duck alders, really take a look at this, and maybe post-budget. It might be a good summer project at the Board of Alders to take a look at these descriptions and try to update them. But the interim step would be to simply adopt them as they are in the charter, so we don't go without job qualifications for these important positions.
Okay, well, thank you. That satisfies the question.
Any other questions? Commission?
One on gender neutrality, but only if we're ready to move on. Okay, another question about gender neutral language, Article 2, Section 16. It has his or her in the text of an affidavit required. I was wondering if that was in our power to change, or if that was standard language elsewhere.
No, let me see. What section is that?
Article 2, Section 16.
we'll fix that. That should have come out. Let me look at that. Hold on. If I missed it, we'll fix it. I'll make sure that's fixed.
Thanks.
Good eyes. Good catch. Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay, so speaking with the vice chair, we spoke about making sure that everybody has a physical copy of the actual red line, so they can we can all go through it and whatever questions or recommendations we may have. I know members that are on the board of alders would like to talk to their colleagues too, to actually get some input too. So I think at this point, we need to get some copies. Staff. I don't know what's going on. We'll just check it out and see how many copies for that. So we can have together for the next meeting. Make sense, Steve?
Yes, no, absolutely. I'm sorry. I thought you were going to have it all for tonight, frankly, but we'll make sure you have it. And I'm more than happy to walk through the department section with you as well, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, absolutely.
There's some appetite for that, so we should do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no reason why we shouldn't have it tonight.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I made it clear that I did not do anything on that because it was not part of the charge, but certainly the commission has discretion.
But don't get me in trouble, attorney. I was just talking.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Don't get me in trouble. I'm not making a recommendation.
All right, well, we'll talk about it and then you guys can decide what you want to do. All right, let's just put it that way.
I do want to make a comment,
Sure,
Chair.
absolutely.
In regards to best practice, if we can actually have an agenda and all the information prior to the night before the meeting. I received the email at 10 o'clock last night.
Absolutely. Okay.
And so we can have the agenda probably 72 hours in advance would be great.
Absolutely.
At least.
So, the art printing gives us a lot of copies.
We'll have them when we do. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, can I just point something out for the record? I did not hand out the gender neutrality changes in section 2. We did make that change in the document. You're still looking at the red lines from 10 years ago, but that change has been made.
Thanks.
I just pulled it up on the screen, so it's been made.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a motion to adjourn, and then we're gonna just open it up during public comment at this point, and we'll go from there. So take a motion to adjourn.
Can before you do remember we have a panel discussion at the next meeting as well. We were going to have a panel discussion on elected official compensation in terms of office.
Steve, I'm sorry. Hang on one second.
Hang
on. So let me just rephrase it. So we're going to just ask for public comment, and then we're going to adjourn. I'm sorry. Excuse me for 1 second. Steve, what were you saying now?
Well, we had planned on the 23rd. I sent the invitations out to put together a panel on elected official compensation and terms of office. I already have the majority leader from Middletown, the former president from Norwalk, and I have invites out from Waterbury and Hartford and Hamden to be part of a panel discussion. So we do have that for the agenda. I think we decided that at the last meeting.
That's correct. And then me, you, and Al will talk early next week too. We'll probably add some couple more items to the agenda. Commissioner Keys.
Steve, one of the
Yes.
things that came at the last meeting, which I thought was very, very important, was to change the word from elector to resident in the city of New Haven, so that we move forward past perhaps what is, I think, a term that has changed in recent years. And I think that's a great idea. I don't know if anybody had ever talked to you about that. Has anybody?
I saw the request, and it's an issue that we're addressing in other communities. You want to maintain the elector standard for certain positions, for elected positions. One of the debates that other communities are having is whether you have a broader residence standard to permit a wider range of people to serve potentially on boards and commissions that go beyond being an elector in the community, somebody who has voting rights in a community. You know, if that's an area that you want to look at, we can do that. It's up to you.
Well, I guess I think that for elected officials, there's state laws and Connecticut constitutional under 7465 that apply, but certainly for the boards of commissions, I'd like to look into that. I don't know if anybody else is.
That's your call. I'm your humble servant. You laughed at the word servant or humble, Judge Keith?
Oh, right. It was kind of a cool cackle, actually. So.
And then on that note too, any emails, input commissioners are getting from residents or neighbors, can we forward over to Liz? Commission, so we can get that together. Thank you. Okay, so we can open it up now to the public portion. Is anybody from the public that would like to testify? Hello, name and address for the record, please.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I got mixed messages about whether this was a public hearing or a workshop, so thank you very much. I'll only say a few things because I understand you might be having another public hearing before May, and there's other people that have been working with me on an idea of opening up the Health Commission to having additional members that would address specific things, primarily environmental justice and violence prevention. This all started to gel. In fact, 10 days ago, a number of us were talking about some national trends that have been looking at, started in Allegheny County, of how to open up health commissions to have more community representatives, and also to really move towards a public health model beyond medical doctors. And so we were looking at that and thinking about some of the primary social, economic, and environmental causes of health problems in our community. And those things are actually the majority of influences on public health are in fact those, you know, cancer, asthma, all kinds of things, they come out of environmental, social, and economic determinants. So this could be a way of recentering in a way that reflects what the national trend is in understanding medicine. So Sean Reeves was here a little bit earlier. Many of the groups that are very involved in thinking through violence reduction, also the movement is away from simply or only a police model to understanding social and economic determinants of violence. So those two things we feel could really benefit, and having places on the Health Commission for those could even help the city and the health department, even when you're applying for grants, that it shows that there's like a full embrace of this more progressive public health model. So we turned in some testimony. I gave electronic and paper copies to Al. And I really appreciate you giving me a moment. if you do set up another public hearing before May,
Which we will.
some of the other people that have been working on this that actually could come tonight would come and they could tell you more about their specific work in the community and how they think this would help out. So I'll leave one copy on the table right now. And then just a sidebar, you know, listening to your discussion about gender neutrality, I knew someone named Kate Swift that published a book on basically the glossary that Steve Mentor talked about that became the standard that New York Times and many publications use. And so you could look at that, published by Yale Press. I don't have a strong feeling about the term human. I think it already is embracing all of humanity. But if you wanted to look at it, I recommend Kate Swift's book. The example about human habitation, for instance, you could shift it to habitation by persons. And again, I don't have a strong feeling, but I really appreciate and support the board's look at that. So that would be all. And thank you very much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it. And I didn't say my name, did I?
No, you didn't.
Ann Spargo, 59 Elm Street.
Questions for Commissioner?
Yeah.
Commissioner.
Good evening. It's always
Hi,
good to see you. Thank
Yeah,
you for your
good to see
testimony.
you.
Are you recommending that we add these qualifications into the charter, or that we could by ordinance create a subcommittee?
The charter currently says that the Health Commission has 5 members and includes 2 medical doctors. And that's the whole definition. And so the suggestion would be to increase the number and then be able to add, this is really for you to think through and define, and we're expecting to meet with Marissa Bond soon, to have a fuller discussion of this, the notion of community representation, but also very specifically environmental justice and violence reduction as people with experience or expertise in working on those issues. The other positions are, for instance, the medical degree plus 5 years experience in either clinical practice or academia. And so it's more ND focused rather than, in fact, public health. And so, in fact, so if our department is essentially a public health department, obviously we need expertise of people to evaluate vaccines, and that's both staff and final review by the commission's experts. I'm not trying to discount the importance of medical doctor training at all. And the 2 required seats I think that's very good. It's really moving to expand. I think you do want to expand the number. Some of the people in the informal group we've had feel it's good to go to an odd number from 6. And it could be having more people with specific interests and qualifications in these 2 areas. I think all of us, when we think of the challenges to our community's health right now, we know since January that the number of shootings have gone way up. We have really good programs and approach from our police department on violence reduction project longevity, other things. And we see this as creating a broader community approach. The Project Longevity is this huge step forward in thinking in different terms about violence reduction. And in the testimony that I offered, this links to, it's the American Association of Family Physicians has recommendations about looking at violence reduction as a public health point of view. Quite specifically as a public health problem. And same with environmental justice. That's the World Health Organization says we need to kind of recenter it on this. So it's really to expand the areas of expertise that are officially engaged in the city on these two really critical issues, not to say one approach or another. When you think of the number of our residents that are harmed by environmental conditions and violence, as one of the members of our little working group said, we need every tool possible.
Thank you. It's an interesting concept. It would definitely change the purview of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a great health department that has, look how it brought us through COVID. It was really a national light, in terms of how fast it adapted. So in a certain way, the excellence of it, we're saying, we know that this is in a way almost what it already is and what it's moved towards in the last few years. It's more folding it into in an official way. And I think that there would be, as we talked about this, many people in the community that would love to serve exactly for these reasons that would encourage participation.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, if we could get some feedback on this from Director Bond.
Yeah.
I think that would be.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. It's really kind of you.
Any other questions from the commission? Steve, any questions from you? Anything?
I was going to raise one question. Anstress, nice to see you. You mentioned something about Allegheny County in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Do they have a model? Is that part of your written proposal?
Yes, it is.
So we'll see that.
Yes.
Okay, good. That's all I wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns from the commission? We certainly apologize because we didn't have the copies. Hopefully they should be coming out, but we'll have those. Commissioner Trevino will make sure that our agendas get out in a timely manner. And any other questions or concerns, can let our secretary know. And with that,
Just one more thing.
Sure.
And email as well. So,
Yes, absolutely.
and then I can look at it all. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Second. Okay. Meeting adjourned.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. 100 pages.
Yes, yes. Good. Very, very good. How do you know her?
Incredible.
Rather than the
I'll be abreast.
Freezing my name once a year.
You know,
Great question. And
What?
Go ahead. I had
food in the back.
I
Look
tried
at Al.
to-
Of course, I haven't seen you for a while.
food in the back.
I want to talk.
Oh, are you waiting on me?
Yeah, wait a minute. Yeah.
We were having an intellectual discussion here. I don't have any hours left. Okay.
Yeah, I took a piece of lemon cake off. That's a little piece of lemon cake.
You look good, but I'm,
That's all.
you look good, but I need cataract surgery. So don't get those.
I went to Crumble today and got those big.
Oh my God.
They had
I
one
had-
that's blueberry graham cracker lemon frosting.
Wow.
Where?
Blueberries on the crumble cookie and milk.
What are
Yeah.
you doing?
A friend of mine said, I want to do something for you. She made me a small lemon pound cake.
I like the place on
With the drizzle.
College Street.
They're
The
good.
cookie place, yeah.
They're good. They taste like
In my mouth.
Pillsbury cookies.
Oh, you go.
I'll tell you, I don't have time to get the I'll wait till I retire. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You weren't expecting that one.
No, not at all. Not at all.